Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the age of Sigmar. Your allies through the Realm Gate this episode are...
I'm Davey, and honestly, I'm only here because I owe Paul 1.5 favors.
I'm Aaron, and honestly, I'm only lamenting the fact that I don't have more 8 Lamentations to read.
I'm Paul, and I'm all gung-ho for this episode.
And I'm Eric, ready to meet my maker. In this episode, we're cracking open 8 Lamentations, Spear of Shadows by Josh Reynolds. We'll be trying out a little bit new, a newer format of book review. We'll cover broad plots, key figures, and what the story could mean for the future of the Mortal Realms. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like this episode and subscribe to the channel so you know when more of these are coming out. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, please leave us a review to help us share more stories with the AOS community. How are you doing tonight, gentlemen?
Doing well.
Okay.
Not too shabby.
Great. I'm really glad that we could all get together tonight and talk about this book. And you guys are on such good, fine moods.
Oh, yeah. I'm top of the world right now.
You know, I have to say, Aaron, though, like, usually you start out really low and everybody goes higher. And I started out, like, kind of middling, and you went below my middling even.
Yeah, I had to stake my claim. That's where I belong.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to get straight into the story phase in just 1 minute. We're not going to be going, like I said, blow by blow. We're going to try out a little new format. We want to make an announcement before we do that. By December 31st, we're going to be switched over to a new feed for the podcast. Those of you watching on YouTube, this is where we'll be. Those of you listening on your favorite podcast, we're working on switching over that feed. There are some technical things to make that happen automatically that have not got to work. So we may have to go a hard shut off of the old feed and ignition of a new feed. When that happens, or however that's happening, we'll be putting up a 3-minute episode announcing kind of where that feed's going to be later on in the next week or so, and then we'll be announcing it on social media, etc. But just to let you know it's happening, so that as you're listening to this, as you're listening to other episodes, you don't get kind of left behind. We'd hate for that to happen. So just wanted to put that out there for everybody. We'll try and make sure everybody's alerted. So we're going to just jump into it. We're excited. We've all been reading this book. Do you guys want to guess how far I made it?
All the way?
I want to believe to the end.
All the way to the end!
Congratulations, Eric. You read a book.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Impressive.
A whole book, like a big boy.
Yeah, geez.
I don't know if I would consider this book a big boy book, but in number of pages, but we did it. All right. So we're jumping into the story phase. And in the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms. All right, how do we want to do this? How do we want to start this off? Aaron, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I do. Let's lay some groundwork. Let's get some background on this. I love approaching it with a who, what, where, when, why sort of situation. So let's start there.
We mentioned we're going to start off here with some spoiler-free content, and we'll fire off some signal flares when we're about to hit spoiler territory. So.
Sounds good.
I think that's a good call. Yeah, we'll get you an introduction to the book for anybody who hasn't read it yet, wants to read it yet. And then, like David said, we'll give you a heads up once we start diving into more spoilery stuff. But first, let's talk when. I feel like that's important when this book is set. So as far as I know, this is setting basically a century or so after the opening of the Gates of Azir. Is that correct? Is that true?
Yep.
As far as you guys know?
Right about 70. Yeah.
What are there other events that have happened prior to this that are important that folks should know about to give some sort of context as to what's going on?
I believe I think the events from City of Secrets have already occurred.
Sure.
Which is significant. We have a character who's been alive. Well, we have a number of returning characters, but one of them has a specific time frame, which gives us, that's how we're getting that accurate. I think our most accurate time frame here is based off the lifespan of Warp Fang.
Oh, sure,
right?
True.
There's some comments about how long he lives. So that's how we're able to kind of bracket this in.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so the entirety of the Realm Gate Wars have occurred, right?
Mm-hmm.
Up to now, and then City of Secrets, and
Excelsis being one of like the founding cities, right? So like we know that a bunch of cities have been sort of founded by the followers of Sigmar, the forces of order at this point. So we know that the world's being populated by quote unquote the good guys.
Season of War went down
Sure.
in there for
Yep.
establishing the. So
Sure.
I think we may or Firestorm at this point.
Okay.
Or not clear on that but they may be concurrent or in and around there. But
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, just knowing when sort of informs, what different motivations are and what different characters that we are aware of already, like where they're at, in their lives or how they interact with everybody else. All right. So we got our when. Where's our where? Where's this taking place?
So it starts off in the city of Excelsius, and it takes us all around. And is Excelsius in Guran?
I think it's
Gur.
Is it Gur? Yeah, pretty sure.
Roman base.
Roman beast. So this whole book takes place. Their whole travel takes place in Gur. So they stay in this realm generally, and so it starts in the city Excelsius. It moves a little bit later to a crazy city, the Crawling City.
Sure. A city that we've seen before. If you read the Skaven Legends book,
yeah, which Davey pointed me to, and I'm definitely gonna go read that because when Age of Sigmar roleplay comes out, I think that Crawling City would be amazing.
Yeah, true.
Setting.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
And we'll get to more about that as we. Well, I don't know if it'd be worth talking a little bit about that now or later. But then the one, I guess we'll just talk about it now because we're not going to be going blow by blow. So what's cool about that city is that it's this gigantic worm where you don't see the front of it, you don't see the back of it, and there's this city that's come up on its kind of grown out of its spines, and Josh Reynolds gets to use some cool words that mean bug hair, and or worm hair or whatever, and so the city's built up on that, and every year at a certain season, they can enter into the belly of the worm, and so this worm's just going across Gur, and it's just eating whatever is in its path, whatever civilization, whatever it could be underground ruins, it could be matter, whatever it's in its path, it's eaten. And so they go down in, it could be a whole different, like they could have gone in one year and they've got like an old dwarven rune, thing. And in fact, that plays a part in here that at some point it dug up an old lodge, and there's a Fire Slayer book, that they find. It's a treasure they put out. Another time it could be like a Skaven hovel and a whole bunch of, stuff out of there. So, I mean, like, every year when they go down, they could be finding a different. It's like the world comes to them.
Well, and you
right?
want to talk about a setting that like only AOS can accomplish, right?
Right.
That would never work. I don't want to say never, but it'd be a hard pill to swallow to try and see something like that in the old world. So this is the sort of environment that really lets AOS shine. There's
a cool. So this is not the only crawling city. There's other giant worms with cities on them as well, and Chaos is like they do been trying to corrupt them, and so I particularly enjoyed there's a one that I think Khorne worshippers have grabbed, and they're like in hot pursuit, like one worm going after another worm, and they're like they might catch up in a few decades or something. Like they mapped it out like, oh, he's closing inexorably, and like in another 100 years we're totally gonna be there. I like that time scale on it. So
well, that's funny.
So my question is. So when we read Plague Garden, there is that area where it used to be home to the giant worms.
Yeah.
Is that where these worm cities come from?
I don't know if any direct connection has been made. And these are not necessarily Nurgle, pictures of Nurgle. Although, to be fair, I think that part of his realm that he took from someone else. So it's certainly possible. I don't think any direct connection has been made. So
yeah, I would.
But he wrote both, so who knows?
I was just gonna say. I mean, knowing him, like.
Yeah. That's true. And then from there, we go to the third city. I'll let somebody else talk about that one.
You're talking about okay. So after that, we do end up venturing to, and I won't get into like how we get there, but venturing to a large forest city. So I think in a previous book, I can't remember which one, it's made reference to the sort of a dwarven a lodge or city or what have you, but it's the dwarves of like the forest, and so like they're making their own.
Plague Garden talked about I think the root wardens, and those I assumed when I was reading that in Plague Garden that we were talking about, and we may have been talking about sort of more classic, because they were seems like they were wiped out in the Age of Chaos. So I was thinking them as sort of the dispossessed before they're dispossessed, but making homes. But these are fire. This is a fire slayer.
Sure. So I don't know if they're the exact same ones, but I still got the same sort of idea of we're not using stone or metal necessarily in the classic ways that dwarfs would, but instead they're using, I don't know if it's stone, wood, or what have you, but they're making their home in the forest instead, which is a pretty fantastical setting.
Actually, at the end of this book, there's the extract from Plague Garden, and one of the quotes from it is about Torglug the woodsman had hewn apart the ironwood shields of the Root Kings.
Root Kings, there we go.
Oh gosh,
and cast down their stone oak citadels.
Yeah, but then those guys were probably from Gyrandon. Now I think
That's
about
true.
it.
But still super
similarities.
Cool. I really like the idea, and it's some unconventional way of thinking about Duarden, which we see more of in this book too.
Water dwarves are next. Colin. All right.
Ice dwarfs.
So then, where do we go from here? The people.
Sure. You want to talk about the who?
So, one of the things which is pretty cool about this book is that they bring in a ton of cool characters. Like we get a lot of Stormcast and a lot of books we've read, but here they make it. I mean, there's a lot of diverse characters coming from a lot of different places, kind of jumbled together. So that's really cool. Why don't everybody go around and who was your favorite?
I talked last time, so no.
Paul's not here.
Oh no!
David,
all right.
David, who's your favorite?
I had a couple favorites, but if we're looking at just that core band that was roaming around, I liked there was Zana, I think, or Zara. She was the free company, like free people. She's from the realm of Shaman, and she was kind of living this mercenary lifestyle. I thought she was particularly well written, interesting, had some nuances, and she kind of had that a little bit of a world weary, but not not like game style, grizzled. Oh, I care about nothing. Like she I thought she was a nice kind of middle of the road character there with some cool things that you could kind of see what a melee style fighter person in the Age of Sigmar. If you're not a Stormcast, what does your life look like? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, she seemed to have the most connections, to be the most connected. She knew a number of the other characters. She was kind of already in the mix, so a great support, and very world-wise, like how she dealt with other people and of other races. So she was definitely crossed those boundaries.
Sure, if you're going to be a sellsword, I think you probably have to build those relationships.
Yeah. Who did you dig the most, Aaron?
Who did I dig the most? So if we're going to talk about the group, I liked everybody for a bunch of different reasons. Let's talk about Lugash, actually, or Lugash, however you say it. So he's a fire slayer without a lodge, without a rune father. He's a doomseeker specifically, and you don't get much more than that from him in terms of his background. He either owes his patron, who we'll talk about in a little bit, owes him a favor or what have you, but he's not talking about it either. So you would think sort of lacking the motivation for him to do what he does throughout the book would be sort of off-putting, but no, I'm into it. I'm down. He sort of has a free will about him in that he's willing to sort of tackle any challenge, and it ends up being a pretty can I say badass fighter. So he's also a member of our adventuring party as well.
Would you say he was slow to warm up to, and in the end was hot as fire?
I wouldn't need to, because you just did. How about yourself? Who jumped out?
Oh man, I really dug Adema of Sandor. She's a vampiress. she has a really cool scene at the beginning of the book, and what I see a note here that perhaps she was in another book, maybe.
Yeah, but I wouldn't know because I live in America and I can't buy that book.
Bitterness abounds.
Yeah.
And so we really get a really interesting in-depth look at what it means to be a vampire in Age of Sigmar. Things like what the thirst is, what their hunger for blood is, it almost has kind of like the flavors, the smells, the odors that they can kind of take sense in the blood. They refer to it as like a song. And there's a couple of things they refer to in that way, but like the blood sings to them. They can be out in sunlight for a period of time, depending on the strength of the vampire. Like that's something that gets explained a little bit. Like, but being fully clothed and in the shadows is pretty good. The vampires are silent as all get out, and pretty capable. And then in this case, she is a direct servant of Neferata, who is a servant of Dagash, and she's very loyal to that. She's has a kind of this direct connection. Neferata called her sister, and we get a little bit about Neferata too, which is kind of cool. But just the way she treats, there's certainly like, I'm your master, but I have respect for you as an actor in this stage. And the thing about Edema is that she also kind of struggles with how spending time with these mortals and kind of her I don't want to say affection, but maybe how it evokes her memories and those I don't know, the whims and the character of the mortals really kind of appeals to her, and so kind of Neferata has some fun kind of teasing her about that, or like also being cautious about whether or not that's going to derail her from her mission, etc. So she was probably my favorite, and some wavering times on whether or not is there any reason for her to be loyal to the group. And what role was she going to play? So, Paul, who was one of your favorite characters? We'll get to all of them, but starting off with who your favorite was.
I really enjoyed Rogan. He's basically the Giran Knight with his demigryph Harrow. So if you just imagine the demigryph Knights, but instead of metal, everything was made out of wood. I really, really enjoyed the kind of the detail and the deep dive that he did in to kind of describe how that worked. It was very interesting for me to have a character that was a former free people, kind of straight up done one way, and then ended up being completely different with allegiance to Lariel. It was really cool. I liked the aspect of his character where he had, as it were, a sidekick with Harrow, but he didn't really treat him as a sidekick, and how Harrow became kind of his own character, especially when his interactions with the other characters. I just really liked it. I thought it was really well done, and I thought it paired really well, especially with when we're talking about the forest. I think it paired really well with how wood could work, basically, and how it made sense that this could be a possibility, that you could have a demigryph with the wood theme instead of the metal theme.
Yeah.
Didn't when the demigryphs first get released in like 8th or something, the whole thing, people were always talking about like just out of the woods came marching these demigryphs because
where do they come from?
Yeah. So that's where they came from, the woods.
Yep.
I feel like
back to their roots.
You're playing ball. I feel like we've been sort of beating around the bush because we've been talking about this adventuring party, but we haven't really touched on what I think most would consider the leader or the main character of this group, and that is one Mr. Owain Volker, who is from Azir. He's a Azirian gunmaster, I think is probably the term. Yeah, so originally came from Azir, but ends up being in the Ironwald Arsenal in the city of Excelsis. And well, I mean, we'll get what happens to him eventually, but he ends up being one of the few, but I think the most regular set of eyes that we as the audience end up looking through. He's a crack shot with his variety of different guns that he's got on him. You know, I think he's your stereotypical main character, tries to do the right thing, and I don't want to sell him short because I think he still was a particularly interesting character. He's not stereotypical, I guess, but he's sort of the individual that you end up spending the most time with, who for the most part end up seeing sort of his inner thoughts more often than not. So
he's the one that we kind of get introduced into this world that some of the people that, like, for instance, Xana is already familiar with.
Yeah,
he's kind of coming from a small space and being introduced to the bigger, wider world.
I think he's you know, as probably the main character here, although we spend plenty of time seeing through other people's eyes. I think he's been written to be the most relatable, and as a result, it's probably why none of us picked him right off the bat. Is like, oh, we kind of know this guy to some degree. You know, he's the most familiar already, and so maybe your interest is drawn to some of these other ones, which isn't to say he's been done poorly. And you get to find out a little bit about how the Ironweld Arsenal works. So it's cool. It's one of the neat things about these kind of books. They fill out those little spaces. If you know, if there's some part of the game that you particularly like, you're going to find somebody along the way that tells you just that little bit more, gives you those hooks for the part of the game that you enjoy.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Owain is a character who, like you said, is meant to be the person we see through the eyes. But at the same time, Owain is somebody that could have actually existed in the old Warhammer Fantasy world.
Sure.
There's not anything about him that's actually different or unique. And he has this kind of mentor that he's kind of been taught underneath, and even that relationship is a traditional relationship, as it were. And I feel like, to me, especially as we go farther and farther into the more AOS periods of the plot and the world, he allows you to explore that from an 8th edition, as it were, perspective.
Kind of like a mundane perspective a little bit, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so it's not necessarily that he's not interesting, it's that we can depend on him because everybody knows who he is. Right?
He's the normal by which everyone else is compared. Exactly. Although in his own, I will say in his own space, he's the youngest, what's his title? Gunmaster. And of a lot of other old stodgy gunmasters, and so has there's a little bit of contempt for him getting the position at such a young age, and he's spent a lot of time being tutored by dwarves, Dwarden, specifically Oaken, who is one of our MacGuffins or things that's drawing him into the fray. And so that's a little bit unique about him, is that he sits between those two worlds a little bit. And he's one of our first perspectives too, which is really cool in this book, of Azir and what life in Azir was like while the gates were closed.
Sure.
So that's kind of interesting.
We've talked in like previous podcasts. I can't remember what books they were necessarily. Probably City of Secrets actually, but it's hinted at the interplay between is the word Azirian, I guess, Azirians, and how the rest of the realm's denizens see them. As the doors have been thrown open and they're sort of populating the world. So again, this is another example of you see sort of glimpses of how those folks are seen in the moral realms.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot that you know he enters into this whole thing. I would say we've got maybe three other kind of main players. So we've got a group of heroes. I guess the only one we haven't mentioned in that group, who comes in kind of mid-book, is Nyoka.
Yeah.
Saul Good.
She's a priestess of Sigmar, and it's cool. Like she must Sagmar, or it's this idea that language evolves in isolation from each other. So you get some sense of the dialect and you know the different ways that you see this somewhat in 40K, right, where the emperor is worshipped as different things on different planets. Well, here you essentially have that same thing. These people have been isolated for a long time, and so the cult of Sigmar changes depending on where you're at. So yeah, she was interesting. She had some familiarity since we'd seen Priests of Sigmar before, but with that cool AOS twist where Sigmar is somehow some kind of worm god, sort of, because she lives in the crawling city. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah, her hammer had was a worm with Sigmar's head on it.
Yeah,
She was also called one of the other characters a witch. So she was called a fanatic. She's maybe got a bit of witch hunter kind of that feel in there. So you start and you get a little bit of insight into that order too, because she's from the Worm City. So or a version of the Voted of Sigmar kind of thing in there too. So they're really pulling in all those different free people stuff.
Yeah. Well, also, I very much felt that her character was a sister of Sigmar, which was a faction that was in Mordheim when it was released way back when. I literally kept picturing one of my models and being like, this is her. There's a model that it's a matriarch, it has a hammer. Like, obviously, the hammer is different, but like, I very much pictured her as that character, that model. So I found it really interesting, especially when it comes to Nyoka, is it also comes into play in Owen's character as well, the politics of being in these places, right? Yep. So it's part of what makes it an older world instead of a newer world, right? So with Owen, it's more of like he's a new guy and there's old people that are already there who are established, etc. And with Nyoka, it's like, well, I'm here, but now this person has come to oversee, and therefore now we're in conflict, right? There's actual politics going on. There's actual like tension between people of the same side. Mm-hmm. And instead of just being like, oh yeah, it's good guys fighting bad guys and hopefully we win, it's no, we're actually going to get into more of the tension between what is this guy good guy want versus what does this good guy want, and how do we actually come in and interact within those two. So I found that to be a really interesting addition that to me fleshed out a lot of more like, nope, these cities have been lived in for a little while. This is more of what's actually going on now.
I actually pictured Gwendolyn Christie, Captain Phasma in this role, or her role from Game of Thrones. So she seemed like she would fit that role well.
Oh, is that Brienne? Is that who that is?
Yeah, Brienne of Tarth.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
So then there's 3 other characters that are kind of other opposition.
Right. You need good villains for a good story.
Antagonists. So who do you want to hit first?
The best one, obviously. Azian Kel. He's a Kel. He's a proud people.
The last of the Kels?
He is the last of the Kels because he killed all the rest of them. Azian Kel.
Killed all the rest of them.
Let's talk about this fine fella. So he is a Khorne. One of the hero types. Khorne. Yeah, sure. Exactly. Maybe even Exalted Deathbringer. Who knows? So we actually for those who have read The Road to Blaze, which is basically a direct sort of prequel to this book, we're introduced to him in that little short story. He has to fight a bunch of other Khornate heroes or champions because he's called to meet up with, how do I say this, Volunder Skullcracker. Yeah. Who is also a familiar face we've seen in a few other books as well. The reason he's called is because he's going to sort of represent Volunder as his champion or his emissary or what have you to go and find the namesake of this book, one of our 8 Lamentations.
Yeah, so this is one of these fun like greater mythology of Age of Sigmar, right? Where Khorne has these 8 smiths, and each tied to a different realm, and they are each have made weapons and all that sort of thing. So,
I don't think we should gloss over that. Do you want to go further on that? Is that all of the myth? Is there more to it?
Well, I think we're actually, and we're interacting with another character that as kind of central role, as it were, even though there's not all that much interaction, which is Grungy, the dwarf god, is actually one of the central characters of the plot, as it were. And there's this really interesting interaction where they describe what's going on between Grungy and these cornate blacksmiths, and how the cornate blacksmiths are making the weapons for Khorne. And they each have a different character because they're each from a different realm. And let's be honest, I love the guy with 8 arms. It was really cool. I immediately wanted to go and convert a model with him. So
well, let's go back to the myth of the 8 Lamentations, because I mean, this is the main draw of the book. This is the main draw of this whole story. I don't want to just tip our toe into it if we're going to go into it. So I just wanted you to keep going on it, Davey, if you want to.
Yeah. So these are 8, mythical like super weapons, and they've each been forged and lost and discovered again and lost again. We saw one of these already at actually we've seen a couple at this point, but we saw one back in Fury of Gork, Marrow Cutter. It was kind of the whole driving force of that book, and that was found and then again lost. Auction of Blood is sort of the prequel to this. The Soul Lash was discovered, and then here Gung, the Spear of Shadows, from the title of this book is what they're hunting. And each of these weapons, so obviously we found out the most about the Spear of Shadows, Gung, in this one. These weapons exist. Had a really cool line specifically about Gung. It was something else masquerading as a spear, a mote of cosmic filth stretching out toward him across every realm, hungry for his death.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's more than just a spear. So you really get the idea, like whoa, super weapon. This one apparently you can speak the name of your target and then throw it, and it will find whoever you've spoken the name of. It will find that person and spear him straight through. So, super powerful. And it's surfaced again. People think they might know where it's at, and so now the race is on. Who can find it and either harness it or keep it out of play on the great big board for the game being played out of Sigmar's Pantheon, Shattered Pantheon versus the Chaos Gods.
And I don't know if we'll talk about it all, but that's a pretty big thing that the spear can do that, right? And it certainly comes up towards the end. There's a couple of points where it first kind of comes up where somebody's like, all right, I'm going to use that ability. They're hilarious that I think are with one of the minor characters in there is a vermin lord. And he has somebody he wants to get his hands on it. So he's like, all right, just let me get this guy. Let me tell you his name. And then you can just have the spear kill him, and then I'll get it. But they kept dying before they could give him his name because they were so afraid of him. So it was just this funny moment where it was like, yeah, somebody's finally going to use this ability, and it's so.
You just touched on a glaring shortcoming of the spear, that you name somebody that you want to throw it at, and you throw it at. When it finds them, sure, it'll kill him, but then it just drops it just ends up where it ends up. So it ain't yours anymore. Yeah. So good luck.
Yeah, read the manual and no refunds.
Yeah. So that was one of our antagonists we're talking about.
What did you think as far as, I mean, he's a Khorne bloodbound guy, right?
Sure.
How did you think of his depth? What kind of character was he? Was he interesting?
I don't want to get too much into it now without spoiling too much.
Okay.
I like his brazenness. I like the fact that, and this isn't a spoiler, but I'm fairly certain he's the dude who killed Caddick in Plague Garden, who also was a Kel. It says in the book here that he killed Prince Caduceus, or whatever his name is, who obviously has to be the knight, whatever in Plague Garden. So that's him for sure.
Good call.
So that, maybe I'm bringing that into this book a little bit too much, because I think that anybody who can take that dude down a peg is all right in my book. But all in all, I think he had his ups and downs, and we can get into it later.
Yeah.
I
But
think
ahead.
we've talked before. It can be tough to write a corn character. I think he was given some things to do other than just be like a slaughter
Yeah.
bus, running over people.
Yep.
And that
running
kept,
through people.
kept him interesting.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, and it ties in exactly with what you said, Aaron, is that he is a Kel. He has a character other than I'm a guy who likes to kill things, right? And
Which
a
is
lot
also
of
the
his
character of
motivation.
what Kel is, I guess. But yeah.
Well, but a lot of the motivation of the Kels is not I want to kill things. It's I want to be the best.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right? And he's the last Kel, and he's like, I'm still going to hold on this tradition of being a Kel, even if I'm the last one.
Sure.
It's become, twisted, as it were, by the Bloodbound mantra, but it still is about him being a Kel. And especially when you've read Plague Guard and you get Kadok, you've got one side of it, and this is another side of it. So it's almost like those two characters, fit in really well together to define opposite sides of the coin, but also something more than just good guy, bad guy.
Sure.
Right.
True.
So another bad guy,
Yeah.
Udok of the 9, and then along with him were the 99 feathers. So Udok is a chaos sorcerer under the service of Archaon. He's a Zinch, Zinch style, and he's also tasked. I mean, it's his job to go and get this as well. There's a number of people of factions trying to get at the spear, and he represents Archaon trying to get at the spear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. He's dressed all in kind of crystalline armor with blue robes. There's some interesting things about what he's capable of. There seems like he does a lot of cool transmutation and illusory type stuff.
Yeah. This
And
guy's got an incredible backstory, like a really cool sort of origin story that they don't reveal here because it's kind of spoiler city for Fury of Gork. So I guess I'll steer clear of it. But he is one of my. He had a nice kind of reveal at the end of Fury of Gork to get what he's all about, and so it made me enjoy him more than I might have because I had that in the back of my head reading this.
So there's a couple of plugs there for Fury of Gork. It would not be a bad idea to go and check that one out to tie into this one.
Yeah.
Well, also the 99 feathers. I'm just in love with this idea. So basically, what the 99 feathers are they are a mercenary troop. I think it'll be a fair thing to say. That can transmutate from ravens into people, but they obviously keep some elements of the people when they transform into ravens, and ravens when they transform into people. And from the moment they gave the description, I was like, oh, we could easily just kit bash this guy out of Age of Sigmar stuff. I mean, the way that they're described, they have a bird skull as a helmet, and they have a cloak of feathers. And I'm like, you know what? You get that skull pack, you get those bird skulls, you just hollow them out, you put them on a normal head, and you bronze them or gold them, whatever. There you go. You've got the mask itself, as it were. And then there was an especially amusing moments where they were in ravens and they were able to kind of interact a little bit more than a raven might be able to with other characters in the story. It was a really interesting thing because there wasn't actually any specific character I felt that was defined as an individual in the 99 feathers.
I don't think so.
It was more, it was an overall. This is who they are, and so
there was one leader of that group.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Could you describe that leader in any way, though?
What's that?
Could you describe that leader in any way?
Female. The leader was female.
Oh yeah,
that's all I can say.
True. That's a good point.
But yeah,
you got me.
I like that was all you can describe, right? Like it is very much like it's a flock of birds. Which one is the leader? I don't know. The one who threatens me.
And interesting too is that they were in service of him. Now he paid for that service. They weren't necessarily chaos themselves, right?
No.
Or at least not. Again, a loyal chaos. They're a mercenary, like you said. All right, last we have one more character to talk about before we get into a few more details, spoiler-free details. Who wants to take Warp Fang?
Yeah, I got it. We last saw him in Black Rift. He was a Skaven warlord that pledged himself to Khorne and actually acquitted himself pretty well there, which means that here, almost 100 years later, he is like absurdly ancient for Skaven, and so it plays that up a bit. It's cool because he has this like he's no longer in his physical prime. Like it hurts him to like stand up from his chair and stuff. But
Me too. Yeah.
but he is he's got a wisdom that most Skaven never lived long enough to obtain. And particularly entertaining is this is a guy he's interacting with a Vermin Lord Warbringer, I believe is what this one is. And the whole time he's like, man, this Vermin Lord is just a straight up idiot. Like he deals with him because it's the Vermin Lord is powerful and but he manipulates the hell out of this Vermin Lord, which is a cool kind of switching. Usually it's the Vermin Lord pulling the strings on everyone else, and this guy's got the wherewithal to make the Vermin Lord dance to his own tune. So, and then
I love that he had an alarm system for the Vermin Lord. That's kind of awesome.
And then in his employ, he's got Quell, who is a renegade. He's used to be a warp lock engineer from Scryer, but I think he's actually been kicked out. Like, I don't know what crazy stuff you have to do to get kicked out of a Skaven engineering guild, but yeah, so that guy's kind of fun for that reason too. So
yeah. And I would say I think that they play, the Skaven are always, ever present throughout these, and so it's always good when they can make an appearance.
Sure. I think a lot of times in these books, Skaven end up being sort of like a pseudo force in nature. Like, even though you get the point of view from them, and we do, like, we see the world through Kretsch's eyes and so on. But even so, it always ends up being sort of a, I don't want to say tertiary because they're still important, but like it's again sort of its own force, whether it's thinking or not, which I always sort of like about them.
Yeah.
So you never know what they're going to do.
All right. And so those are many of our main characters. Is there anybody else that, as you mentioned, Grogny is in it? I don't think there's anybody else to mention really.
I mean, Captain Brunt, if you want to talk about him.
There's a Caradron Overlord captain.
Sure.
Who's, just as you'd expect, full of barnacles, crotchety, drives a hard bargain. I think they're
Also has a soft spot,
right here. Where you can,
you found it.
But I think they create. I mean, the Caradron aren't written into a ton of stories yet in the mainstream, right? And I think that they paint a pretty good picture of the Caradron in this book, and give you a good sense of them, right?
Agreed.
And I think that's where Davey, we were talking about Zaina and her kind of worldliness. She even knows, in this short period of time, she even knows Caradron Overlord captain in such a way that she can press his buttons, and so that says a lot about her as well. They're still relatively new. But interestingly enough, even the crawling city has, like ports out of the way, and Adema talks about some of them in Shyish where they stick to the mountaintops. They don't come down into the depths and that sort of stuff. So you get a little bit more character and role for the KO.
Yeah, totally.
There's another army. It's not a character, but there's Spiderfang in here. So that's
oh, we should probably mention them.
Yeah. I did. You're welcome.
More like you're welcome to you. Like, that was a personal favor to yourself.
Thank you, Josh Reynolds.
Yeah.
I love it.
Let's finish up our sort of spoiler-free segment with a quick overview of like the what, like what's the, we already talked about it some with the what the Lamentations were, but the underlying driver behind the book, and then once we've kind of touched on that, we'll drop the spoiler curtain and get.
Well, I'd like to say, I mean, Neferata, there's a point where Neferata is kind of speaking to herself or thinking to herself, and she's talking quite a bit about just, she's a gatherer, a hoarder of opportunities, of, creating possibilities, right? And for her, capturing these 8 Lamentations, if she were able to take them and put them into her collection, the ability to, have one of these weapons could change the course of a battle. She says then having 2 of them in your possession could change the course of a war. Having more could shape all the realms. And so that's the emphasis she puts on those. And it definitely seems like some people have a much more direct thing that they would want to do with them. And in some cases, there's a fear that, especially the Spear of Shadows, could be used to kill a god.
Right.
So Ilario could be in danger, Nagash could be in danger, Arcan could be in danger, and not just from the forces of the alliances of order, death, and destruction, but from other chaos factions as well. And so I think that was a really interesting part of the book that placed a really good emphasis on what the motivations could be, and what the kind of the levity of these weapons in the realms, if found, would lay bare.
Yeah, I think the other thing that is going on here is it's a bit of like an AOS A-Team or a Mission Impossible scenario, where you get a bunch of different people together to make your superhero party to go on and try and attain this Spear of Shadows. So that's basically the idea: is you collect all these different people, you form this team, and you're going to go out and you're going to try and take this Spear of Shadows. But of course, nobody knows exactly where it is, and nobody knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah, it's a race, like when it comes down to it. Yeah.
It's a bit of a rollicking adventure story, in my opinion. It's a lot of there's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of I know where I'm going next, but I don't know where I'm going after that.
Sure.
Right? Like everything is kind of stepping stones. So I appreciated that a lot.
Sure. There's a lot of like tenuous alliances of folks working together sometimes, but not all the time. You don't know who's helping who. I think that it's not a common trope, but like it touches on stuff that you're used to seeing in different sorts of other media or other mediums. But it works well. It works well in this setting, especially when you have an important, not just a MacGuffin, but an important, like useful like goal that folks are after. It had stakes, as Eric touched on, knowing that the winner of this goal really could threaten anyone at any time. Those are some big stakes.
And so it's revealed to us in a couple of stages, that there's an early very early interaction between Edema and Ahazian about getting this kind of splinter of the spear. And so that's something that's this little splinter is kind of attuned,
a lodestone, as it were.
Yeah, so it's showing him what direction, or how to, it's singing to him a little bit how to retrieve this.
Because he pulls it out of a breastplate of a white king that had been killed by it or something.
Which, I mean, small potatoes, right? Who's throwing it at a white king?
Well, the way they described this guy, he looked just like that the white king model that used to be Krell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
Well, and who knows what he was before he was a white king, right?
Sure.
Like, he might have been some amazing like tap dancer or something.
If it was Krell or some equivalent of Krell, then it probably would take the Spear Shadows to take him down. All right, I take back what I said.
and so he's got that. Oaken, who we'd mentioned briefly, the mentor of Volker, had gone somewhere to track it down, and Grungni had lost communication with him. And so that was one of his pieces. As I mentioned, Edema was kind of going after that same piece to try and that Ahazian was doing. So they're kind of tracking each other to try and get there. So there's a lot of different, and obviously Udak had the 99 feathers. You see these ravens early on. And so, they're kind of helping seek out and try and find information to help him find it, etc. So there's a lot of kind of different launch pads for these different characters into this, which was, the variety of that was fairly interesting. That there's a lot to pull from there as well. But our main dig into the story then is we get to meet Grungni and how he forms this team and puts it together. And that's really interesting. And we had one other book. I mean, so in a lot of Age of Sigmar books, we get Sigmar talking to Stormcast. He's a real god talking to real people. We got some time with Alariel, but one of the tensions, as you would imagine here, is Grugni has been missing, has been gone for a period of time after he kind of forged the last armor or taught Sigmar his smiths how to create the Stormcast armor. He disappeared, and so there's, in the same way that there's a tension. We talked a little bit about Sigmar having left the mortal realms, closed the doors, and abandoned everybody who was left. There's some feeling that after that happened, then Grugni kind of did a similar thing where he took off and abandoned the alliance post Gates of Azir. So there's that tension here, and here we get to see him, and we get a few of those. We get to hear a little bit more, his side of that. It's interesting because it's not in a answers every question kind of way.
No.
But I felt very satisfying. I think in how the character answered it, who he is, and how he does that.
Well, this is something that's in the very first chapter, where Grungy is in his smithy, right, and he is attacked by Khorne. One of the really interesting things, little details, was
is this something we want to? Do we want to go to spoilers after that, or is that a spoiler?
This is first chapter.
I know, so I'm just wondering if we want to jump to warnings or anything at this point. Klaxons. If you don't want to hear any spoilers about specific details, any key story points, except for that sort of thing, go ahead and click away now. I guess one thing I'd say, this happens on other when I see other book reviews or movie reviews, that sort of stuff, when it's spoiler free. So before we go to get spoilers, what was your initial impression of the book? If you were to had a scale, what would that scale be, and where would you put it?
Sure. I don't have a scale yet. I'll talk and I'll come up with a scale. I think I feel like we've just recently read a few Reynolds books in a row. I actually just read Hammerhall too, so like Reynolds is on my mind. And what I love about
you got a Reynolds scale?
Okay. I'll see you later. What I love about series like this, or extended worlds like this, is the interplay across different books and having characters show up in different places and sort of becoming acquainted with characters, not just in an individual book, but over a course of many books and many settings and so on and so forth. So now that we're getting a lot more of that, this book being a prime example of it, a little bit of Playgarden was doing the same thing. We're getting more and more of it as time goes on, and that only makes me enjoy these books more and more. Heck, the stories could start getting worse, and I wouldn't even notice because I just love the interplay between the different characters. So I will say that this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, because I'm getting more and more of the interrelationships, the play between characters that I've grown to know and appreciate. So having said all that, I'll give it, as far as, I don't want to qualify it like this, but let's keep it in the microcosm of AOS books. I think it's a 5 out of 5.
All right.
Boom.
Davey, what you got?
I think I'm right on board with Aaron. I really enjoyed that it was it really made the Age of Sigmar universe feel more lived in. Like it was one of the best books for getting a feel of the overall, universe for Age of Sigmar. Better than City of Secrets, because that was just the one city that saw more places, saw people from greater areas, still tied into the greater mythology of Age of Sigmar. So yeah, I'll go. The only thing I would say is that like, what do you? Yeah, no. Playgarden had more moments where I was like, holy cow, that was amazing. I think, but this I liked more for the just for world building. So I'll give it 8 out of 10 aethermatic weapons.
Ooh.
2 thumbs up.
Nice. How about you, Paul?
I really enjoyed that it was an adventure story. Some of the stories especially in the beginning of AOS, tended to be like, there's this force, and there's this force, and they're going to fight. So let's talk about how they're going to fight. And now they're fighting. Yay! Right? Like, that's very simplistic, I understand. But, like, it tended to be more of like, this is what's going on. And this was more of a, like I said, a rollicking adventure story. I really enjoyed the getting together of the team, the interaction of the team, the journey itself before they had the final showdown, as it were. So I really enjoyed it a lot. So I'm going to give it 8 out of 8 spider legs.
Oh, great.
I know we're going to do fun ratings.
That was a scale I thought of first, and I was like, I can't take that. Paul will come over and choke me in my own house.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so I agree. I mean, like, the stuff that I read when I was a kid was the Sword of Shannara stuff. It was the Dragonlance stuff. And there's a resurgence in the Dungeons and Dragons, and which is a collection of disparate individuals who bring different things to the party. And I have really enjoyed kind of the army books of that we've read so far of the Stormcast. I like getting to know them, but this was one of the questions I had was, I don't know how normal people, non-superheroes like the Stormcast, could live in Age of Sigmar. How would they survive outside of a city wall, right? Because there's so many things that want to just kill you and eat you and whatever. And this really kind of explained it to me in a very, to me, it showed it in a very realistic way. It told a story that was plausible, right? In as far as high fantasy goes. And one of the things I loved was that in all of the books and all of the campaign books, there's a ton of these little name drops and hey, there's this place and there's that place and there's tiny descriptions that make you go, oh, I want to go there. And this book lets you go there. This book shows you those things and lets you get a little piece of it. And they do even more kind of, do some other name dropping, that sort of thing. But I felt very satisfied getting to go to some of these places, getting to get even just a chapter or two in one of these spots and really kind of have a little bit more to chew on. I would say that this was a lot of the Stormcast book don't have a ton of dialogue. They're not known for this all kinds of different characters playing off each other, though some of the, Plague Garden had more of that. But I think dialogue is something that I would want. I want a little bit of work on from Josh, in that I felt like some of it.
Come on, man! Don't say that.
Well, it was kind of the constant jabbing each other. Mm-hmm. Like it felt like there was almost all just like if someone would say something, and someone's like, "Oh, sarcastic wargamer, you," or whatever. Anyway, so everyone was a little bit snarky, but I felt other than that, I think that that it was really good. So I guess I would give it, because we've been reading Sigmarine books, I'd give it 8 out of 10 hammers. So that's what I got. So I mean, over
worm hammers.
Are those like the small hammers? Are those like the throwing hammers?
The hammers.
Oh, no, but is it a worm hammer with Sigmar's face on it, or
you decide?
Is it a worm with Sigmar's face?
Yeah, you decide. So overall, we really enjoyed the book. It sounds like, and had a lot of fun reading it. And so now we're going to get into talking about what some of the things that we'll be talking about. So again, spoiler. Don't go past here if you're planning on reading it still, or if you have issues with spoilers before you read stuff. We're going to be talking through kind of more of the points, more of the details. We're going to pick out some of the themes. We're going to talk about what we think this means for future stories, and other setting points, etc. So stick around if you want to join in with in that conversation with us. All right, so we've done our spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning done.
So, arc of the story. We start off in Excelsius. Do we get more about? City of Shadows?
Secrets.
A little bit. City of Secrets was more inside the city, right? A lot of interior. This starts outside the city.
Yeah.
Did you guys? What did you find out more about Excelsius that you didn't know?
as I kind of said before, it's also about the politics, right? Like we've got this Azir migration in, we've got this, these guys are leading from the back, these guys are leading from the front, right? Which is the whole thing with Owain. And it's a very, we start out again as a grounded Owain's character in 8th edition. It's you dig ditches, you have cannons, you're fighting the Skaven. It's a very, this battle could have easily happened in 8th edition and nobody would have blinked an eye.
Yep.
Right? Like it's a very standard setting, even though it's in this very fantastical Excelsis world or city that would not have existed in 8th edition. It very much is starting outside and kind of grounding you as the story starts to move forward.
Absolutely. What did you guys think of that? What else did we learn about Excelsius, or anything that you guys really stood out to you?
Its troubles are not over. It's under siege, big time. You know, by the Skaven specifically. So that's what we kind of come into.
Yeah, I really liked how, again, similar to City of Secrets, we get a sense of the human perspective of the Stormcast. So when they're in the trenches and the I don't know, are they Sons of More, or is that a different
Sons of Malice?
Sons of Malice come down and kind of help the lines, that sort of thing. Like, you know, they're just huge, you know, and they're some of them have been reforged a lot, and so there's not a ton of emotion. So there's a little bit of trepidation, but not. It doesn't feel like they feel endangered by them, right? That any of that reforging has turned any of them scary.
Maybe not endangered, but we do see examples of maybe them not, because of their own sort of immortality, maybe they're not valuing the mortality of the humans that they're there to protect. So I think we see examples of folks being like, oh, we gotta save this group, we gotta save that group, and they're like, no, they're lost. Like, sorry, man. So maybe they do end up losing a little bit of their humanity, being the Stormcast, which I think we've seen elsewhere too.
It's an interesting critique, because that same critique is leveled against gods in the story as well. That they're very pragmatic and not always as compassionate. Although Volker disagrees. So yeah, I mean, and so loved that Volker was kind of like this talented guy, kind of held down by others in his rank. So he's kind of stuck in this position.
I know the feeling, yeah.
But it also meant that he had it was the most sharp and honed, and like in the field and doing that. I liked some of the description of like the Ironweld arsenal and people be able to doing math in their head and arcs and that sort of stuff was kind of cool.
I don't know that feeling. I can't do that.
I thought it made sense that an organization that is so heavily influenced by Duarden is going to be is going to place a value on your age, So I was like, yeah, that makes sense above and beyond, just, hey, what's this young guy doing? It's like, yeah, sure. It's cool. It's it's a hybrid organization, right? Duarden, big time on it, but a lot of humans in there too. So
well, and that's interesting too, because the Ironweld Arsenal certainly is the initial mixed race faction, and so we've seen some with Firestorm, some more, but from the first one. So yeah, I mean it's interesting to see how they work together, and it's cool seeing long rifles and cannons and repeater pistols, all that kind of stuff, kind of come into play as well. But so Volker gets called away, correct? He sees. Well, so there's a big. Well, we're not going to go blow by blow. This is hard for me. I'm trying to figure out how to do this.
Yeah, you want to talk? Well, you could say, well, we were dropped sort of from his perspective. We're dropped into a fight, like an invasion with Escape, where there's some losses. Even Stormcast themselves are getting taken down by like swarms and hordes of Skaven. And I've started and I'm going, and actually I can't remember what happened. Do they end up like calling it off? What stops the fight?
Yeah.
Like he gets out somehow.
They've sent a number of waves, and eventually this wave is defeated, like some of the others. They figure out what are testing waves and what are true waves. Anyway, point being, Owain narrowly avoids death, loses some buddies, but he's pulled from the battle, and then he's pulled on to a greater purpose, which is to be a cool dude in this book.
Sure. I think actually that's what it says. Like he has a vision that says, "Hey man, go be a cool dude in the book."
Yeah.
Isn't that right? He ends up seeing like some image of Grogny somewhere, like
in the fire and in the smoke.
Yeah.
So I mean, as far our first thing we wanted to talk about was character arcs. Do we want to just talk through kind of Volker's arc? He's our main character, and see who plays off of that. I don't mean blow by blow, but I mean like he starts off again. He's leading a small group. They respect him, right? But the hierarchy doesn't respect him. But we find out that he gets kind of picked by Grogny. And we find out later that one of his kind of higher ups sees the potential in him, and who speaks to Grogny, who counsels Grogny, it sounds like, and pointed at Volker as a really good pick for going on this mission.
Yeah. And he as he leads this, as he's part of this group, he ends up falling into something of a leadership role for this team. What I appreciated that I thought Reynolds did a good job of establishing this as a reasonable thing that could happen. This guy is not like, oh look, the traditional fantasy trope of here's a farmhand who turns out he's like the hero that saves the world. This guy's done some things already, right? Like he's been in combat and he's led men and dwarves in combat. So it was not unreasonable that he could step into this leadership role. So that was enjoyable.
Well, yeah, and you talk about believable. I mean, I do think it's certainly gradual. It isn't immediate, and every person he meets from the group has so he steps from his Ironweld Arsenal hierarchy into this group who've all seen the world and know more about the world than he does, because one, he's from Azerite or Azir. He's a spoiled rich kid without much experience outside the walls of Excelsior, and he hides behind a gun, right? So it seems like everybody in this party has some reason to kind of push him down and kind of dismiss him, I guess, in the group. And you get some of that's more playful, like Xana's a little more playful about it. Who's the Dwarden? Lugash is pretty, blunt about it, right? Rogan's indifferent. Like he's kind of like everybody likes Rogan, right? Guy you want to have beers with. But he goes through that initial kind of stunting or dismissiveness from the get-go, because he's the human who's always done the right thing and been a part of the establishment or whatever. I don't know. So at what point does he start kind of becoming leader? I mean, nobody's really appointed as leader. There are a bunch of people, nobody really is like, hey, let's do this together, guys. Everything is awesome.
I think it happens notably. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to get us there. I think so. He's called to sort of action by Grogny through this vision, right? So he ends up finding the secret meeting place of Grogny somewhere. I think somewhere in the city, Excelsius, right? He finds this back alley and he ends up meeting up with this group. And so Grogny sort of this call to action to say, hey man, I got these 8 lamentations I want to get my hands on, this spear specifically, and you lot are going to go find it for me. So everybody's like, yeah, sure. For their own internal reasons, they're on board. So the point is though, so then how do we find out? Where do we go from here? So we've mentioned before, Owain Volker's got this dwarf mentor who actually all this time has been under sort of Grogny's employ, or he's been working for him for this whole time, and he'd already been sent off to go look for it. So the best course of action maybe is to follow his trail. So they know where he went, and they need to sort of follow his path, right? And so to do so, they end up having to hitch a ride on a Caradron boat. I don't know what they're called. Davey would be my guy to tell me.
Do they call them boats, Davey?
Boats.
Boats. Yeah, ships, sky vessels, whatever.
Sure.
No, it is not a boat. Davey, you have to do it in a specific way. It's not a boat. It is not a boat. It's a ship.
It's a ship.
It's something.
And at any point, anybody stop me when you want to chime in on any of this stuff. But so they they're gonna try and hitch a ride. How do they do that? Well, fortunately, we have this roster of characters now in our group who have their own connections, and they know different people, and they have their own skills. So we're relying on, what's her name, Xana. Yeah, Xana Mathos, who is that sellsword. She's got those connections we talked about before. She knows people. She's worldly. So she knows a particular captain, Captain Bront, who I believe we brought up earlier, who owes her a favor. And he's going to take the group to sort of follow the trail of this Oaken, specifically to, Aaron's handing it off to someone else.
The Crawling City?
Yeah, the Crawling City.
What is its name?
Shoe something.
Shulgol.
Yeah, that's better.
That one.
Is that Nayoka's last name? I don't know.
Oh, it's all the same.
No, it says Shugol, the Crawling City.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that's what we see early on is, I mean, certainly Volker is kind of overwhelmed a little bit, like, hey, a god is speaking to me, right? And there's this thing. But what really kind of brings him to earth is that he's going to find Oaken.
Yeah.
He's going to find out what's happened to him. He's not. Yes, he's supposed to go, find the spear, but even towards the end of the book, like, he has to be reminded he's not here to save Oaken, but that's what grounds him. And I think that's what people see in him too, is that amidst all of this epicness, what he cares about is his friends. He shows loyalty to his friend. And then I think, when they get to the Crawling City, as you said, there's a couple of moments there that really kind of show that to the group as well. So yeah, we get to Shulgol, and
is there a Great King show up? Does he show up before Shulgol?
He has a kind of a
cameo
appearance, as it were.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well,
here's the thing. There's this thing here.
We'll talk about him as we get to because that's the more important one, right?
Yeah, I agree.
But they do meet the Great King, and we'll tell you who the Great King is in a little bit.
After this commercial break.
See ya.
Is we right back.
So we get to the Crawling City, and like I said, pretty fantastic setting in that. One, it's a moving city, so the landscape's always changing. It's always eating stuff in its gullet. So when you go down there, you're always meeting a new civilization or the ruins of a different civilization.
Or just dirt, like sometimes.
Or just dirt. And the alienness of the structures there. Like, there's at one point where like a table has been fashioned out of like the hairs of a worm, and so it's flexible. There's a ton of like just alienness to it. But it shows how it's integrated, these people's lives integrated into it, which is really cool. Anything else you guys want to talk about as far as the city itself? We already talked about, but the things that happen there, they have to. What was the last place? This was the last place they saw Oaken.
Yeah.
What was he doing there?
Did he find the book? I honestly can't remember. So they have this book in this library, the library for the worm. I don't know. I'm sure it had a name. And the book apparently describes basically their next destination that they have to go to, right? So it's a Fire Slayer book. Fortunately, we happen to have a Fire Slayer in our group who can read the dead language, or he has to translate it in some capacity. But that was sort of the next clue as to where we needed to go next. As it goes in stories like this, there's a clash between the good guys and the bad guys who happen to meet them in the same place. They had either they followed them, I think is how they, the Zinchian Udak.
Yep.
His 99 feathers.
The 99 feathers.
Yep, exactly. So they've followed him there. There is a short scuffle, which sort of just proves to both sides that they're on the right track, right? If you find your adversary there, you must be doing something right. Yeah. But they're able to eke out a victory and come away with this book, which sort of leads them. It's the next clue as to where they need to go next to try and find their spear.
Yeah, and Adema comes out of the shadows and kind of helps in this case. And this is like the first place where Volker kind of speaks up and thinks of her, kind of stops anything harm from coming to her. Kind of, he just kind of speaks out. Sure. And I think this is one of those places where everyone's saying, like, he's the young guy, but there's a bit of wisdom there. There's a bit of pragmatism that you want in this kind of situation. He's not cowering. He's not, withering in this scene. And even those who he's seeing the possibilities of allies where most might not.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
and
a bit
even
of
if the group disagrees with him, they're still willing to go along with what he's doing because they respect. Already at this point, they're starting to respect his decisions.
It's also a bit of a Manfred syndrome. Like AOS in general has a bit of this like Manfred syndrome of like vampires are bad, but not all the time. We can work with them. We can make this work, right? It's the whole we had
Manfred
this
ended
whole
up being
alliance.
bad, though.
What?
Manfred ended up being bad. They were right.
Yeah, but the whole idea that the death and the order can kind of mix together, and
Yep.
you know, so it was an interesting dynamic, and we almost have this third party, as it were, entering in. So there's the good guys, the bad guys, and the not good guy, not bad guy, kind of both right
More
now.
gray area.
Yeah.
Well,
I like to live.
well, and I think that's AOS. I mean, from the beginning, we knew that there was an alliance between everybody versus chaos, and so we're piecing some of that back together. We're seeing some of those relationships kind of form again, right? I mean, this could be a groundwork for, work between Neferata and Grugni, like that sort of thing.
Well, I also really liked when Ahima was climbing up the side of the worm, and they were talking about how there were watchtowers and there were spotlights, and almost like a prisoner of war camp. Like I got a little security going on, and it's just to get into the city. It was a really interesting and like kind of jarring moment of being like, oh, this is definitely different.
Well, I think it was one of the touches that makes it feel a little more lived in is that the inhabitants of the Worm City have been living in this city and have thought about the possibility that somebody might just run up to it and climb up the side to try and sneak in, and so they need to have these precarious watchtowers and guard systems perched on the outside. So
yeah, because they had, in fact, I think Skaven had overrun them at one point, and so they swore not to let that happen again. There's an interesting role of technology in this book that is interesting, and I don't know if this is something we could touch on in a theme down the road too, but just to put a pin in that for later. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a point in which the team kind of gels a little bit. They've gotten to their first scrap and seen what each other's metal is made of, and stuff. And so and then they negotiate to get back on board the ship, the Caradron ship, and head over to
Forest of
Gorch, because that's what you do with Forest.
Mm-hmm.
And as they go over there, so this is one of those first times, again, if we're talking about Volker 2, there's a lot of cool development for everybody. This is a part 2 where we really kind of get a sense of what he's capable of as well. So what happens, you mentioned the big king. Is it Great King?
Great King?
Great King, Aaron?
It seems great. So they're
Who dat?
It's they're flying. They got their heading. They're heading to this mighty force that they can see off in the distance. Lo and behold, they're beset. They're attacked by the Great King, which is not only a megalithin, but I think probably the biggest of all the megalophins. Maybe even the king of am I saying that right? Megalofins. Anyway, so it's this aerial shark beast looking thing, but it's let's say it's big. It's a large creature.
Well, it's that picture in the KO book where there's an Archanaut standing next to the huge beast, right? Like that's the idea. You know what I'm talking about? They'd harpooned the sky whale, as it were.
Yeah, the megalofin. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that picture is right out of this book, it is exactly what I drew upon, and I did not expect that thing to be in here, like the giant shark to end all sky sharks, which was really cool.
But the reason that's even important, though, is because it's actually being, I'm not gonna say controlled, but ridden or done by one of our
influenced.
Yes, by Udak, who is riding at Cowboy style. If Cowboys riding Sky Sharks, egging it on and sort of sicking it upon the Caradron ship. I mean boat. I mean ship.
Sky vessel.
Sky vessel. That's what I meant.
So
but this is another, I think, a prime example, another example of maybe not Volker not so much earning respect from everybody, though I reckon they respect this, but sort of showing his capabilities when he's able to.
Yeah, I think he shows to us, the reader.
Yes, exactly.
And the scene actually ends like, so everyone's like, get down below, or rushing, and he's just sitting there trying to tune everything out. He's been using his sights, and just been honing in. He's the one who discovers that there's the sorcerer on top of that. He just sees through the witch fire, all that kind of stuff, all the kind of glowiness of him, and picks out the kind of the man behind the mystic, and takes a shot. And it ended this. The chapter ends. He takes the shot, and gets basically the megalofin totally knocks the ship over with its tail or something to that effect, and just sends it careening down into the forest canopy.
Into the spider webs.
But it was really good. So they had also so I thought that was a really cool battle, sky battle, that again I wasn't expecting from this book. Took us to a place that we all want to go. Like, since the KO have come out, we've wanted that battle, and this book gave it to us. And had some just really cool scenes, that struggle between Udak and the beast, and kind of how he talks about this beast who has this may have again the myths of may have been around before the gods were, kind of thing. Like, they're just so big, so massive, or whatever, and he's just force of will's controlling this thing, surfing on it, etc. There you go, Vince Venturella. And so I mean, and then just the way the crew's reacting and interacting, and that sort of stuff's really just, I don't know. It's the stuff that is, if I, as a kid, I would have eaten that up like crazy, and as an adult, I am as well.
Sure, nothing's changed whatsoever.
You even finished the book; it had to be good.
Yeah.
So, but we get down to the canopy. The ship has been beat up.
Yeah,
they go through the.
It doesn't. It just.
They get into the forest. They see spider webs everywhere. They fight off some spiders.
Find nothing to worry about, though, right? Spider webs,
a little bit of spider.
They get and they find kind of the formations and things that the Dwarden had done to kind of integrate with the forest.
It's a really cool idea, right? Like, they're actually able to shape the trees, as it were. I don't know if it's necessarily they're like controlling the growth or not. I think they described it as more of like using heat to discourage growth and to, like create holes, as it were. It was a really cool idea that definitely had never crossed my mind before of, well, what do you do if you don't have rock? What do you do if you don't have stone, steel, whatever? All right, well, I guess we got to make it out of stone, or make it out of trees, as it were. So it was a really cool idea, but then it was far more than just like, we're going to make a keep or a castle here, right? We're going to make a lodge. It's like, we got these roads coming in from here, and we've got these roads coming in from here, and all these different levels. And it was far more of like creating a city than just a lodge. So I thought it was a really cool execution of the idea. And at the same time, because Rogan, with his wooden armor, with his wooden sword, they're describing how they make the sword, they're describing all this kind of, details of his character, it makes this setting, right, the Forest of Gorch being a lodge, far more believable, because they've talked about how they can use and manipulate this material in a different way because of their allegiance with Alarielle.
Yeah. Well, they talk a little bit about how the character of the Dwarden are that they're so they have such an impact on the world around them that the world changes. Mm-hmm. Whatever environment they're in, that it changes.
I'm a little upset that we have these Dwarden coming in though and taking my wood elf jobs, which is kind of a bummer. I mean, they're sort of getting pushed out to the periphery now.
Well,
make Gorch great again,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
Like there
I was
are
keeping
no,
mine vague. You made it real, Eric.
there are no elves.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what it is. It's because we just don't have many elves.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, we had free people. Rogan is free people. Forest dweller. We got Fire Slayers, forest dwellers. I mean, what makes Wanderers unique anymore?
It's true. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Every other army.
I
What?
might as well just throw my elves away.
I've always said that.
So they make it further in. They hear partway through. They hear drums. They got goblins. That sort of stuff. Big kind of war march. They get, the grots. They get to this kind of the center, and they find the heartwood tree. They see a bunch more stuff there. They get into a fight with a gargant. All that kind of fun stuff. I mean, as they get to that hardwood tree, is there anything that really jumped out at you guys that was kind of unique and worth mentioning?
Where did the gargant come from? Like, I guess that was. I mean, that seemed a lot surprising. I like that it was there.
I think he started down below.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
he climbed up.
Okay. I have nothing else to say about that. I was just gargant.
Yeah.
Gargant. Whoops.
There's a couple. I had to read that part a couple of times as well.
Yeah, and they're finding evidence that on top of the wiping out of the lodge that was there, there's been some other kind of fight. They start to figure out that Skaven, likely judging by the scorching and all that sort of thing. So somehow Skaven and the Grots have been at war with each other more recently, which what's that? Yeah, well, it's to their advantage to some degree because it gives them a maybe some cover to sneak in, and also possibly some hope that Oaken and his crew might have been able to slip in through all that mayhem. So simultaneously, more opportunity and greater danger as a result.
Also, what I definitely got the feeling of was that it was the slow decimation, right, of this lodge, and they're slowly being killed because the Spiderfang aren't quite an overwhelming force. They're more of just like a wearing down, right? So you have this slow battle. The slow battle is the Fire Slayers are slowly being eliminated, but at the same time they're wearing down the strength of the Spiderfang, and then the idea is that the Skaven have come in and taken advantage of this long, drawn-out fight to be able to come in and do some quick damage, right?
It's the classic 3-player game situation where the two folks fight, and then somebody named Eric swoops in later and cleans up.
Or
and then the fourth party comes in like 3 minutes too late.
Sure, true.
Totally balanced.
Just real quick, just leading up to this, you get a real like Mines of Moria vibe, right? Like you're coming looking for this group of dwarves and wolves.
Down the goblin, down the goblin, down.
Fly you friends.
I like the treasure hold in the very center of the Heartwood, where they're talking about the Fire Slayer hanging the treasure from the chain so they can cut it. That was a really cool.
That's super rad. Yeah,
interesting. Just detail, as it were. So basically, because it is their treasure, right, and they don't want it to be stolen if their lodge does get destroyed, they've suspended it in the middle of a large chamber, and they've gotten to the last few left, and so they decided they're going to cut it so that no one will get it. If they can't have it, no one else will get it.
What happens when they cut the chain?
I believe it falls down into the Arachnarok nest, if I'm not mistaken.
So what had happened though is when the Grots had Spiderfang had taken over, had fought the Dward and had killed them to the man, the spear was still in that hold, the Dwarden had cut the lines. All their treasure fell down into this pit, along with the spear, and the Spiderfang knew that it was something to be revered, and so they put up all those pikes with Dwarden head facing it as kind of a way for the dead to protect them from this. And they stuck an Arachnarok down there to basically protect them from anything evil coming that way, because they knew that the spear was going to call somebody to come and retrieve it who was going to be a great fighter, and they needed to try and ward it off. And so there's some superstition there. And so that's the why, how, what of that kind of the Spider-Fang civilization around this vault and around that spear. And what happened is the Skaven came in by land and by tunnel. They had, this big machine that we'll talk about a little bit, but and then they tunneled up through the ground through the vault, and were able to actually grab the spear that way.
So I have to say this is my major disappointment. Is we get into like the chapters were labeled like the Curse of the Spider God, and you're like, okay, you've got some goblins that are on spiders, and then you're like the lair of the Arachnarok, and there's an Arachnarok, but he's already like heavily damaged, and I'm like, where's the like awesome Spider Fang army? And it just wasn't there because it had already been.
I ask myself
worn down
all the
defeated.
time where the awesome Spider Fang army is.
What?
Just joking.
Well, and I think
So
that's how it had to be. That was how it was believable. I think that Volker and Lugash were able to take out Ragnarok, right? And in the end, it wreaked tons of hell before it ended up dying. So, but
you touched on something else actually, though. But the fact that the Spider God actually is a real presence here too, right? Like that's something when you want to talk about stuff that maybe we learned that we didn't know about the world. Like I didn't actually understand that the Spider God was like a real like presence, or had a real a force in the world.
Yeah. So there's like a little bit of detail in the Grand Alliance book, and basically the Spider God is a huge Arachnarok that bit Gork or Mork's toe. They don't know which, and gained a huge amount of gained a portion of his power, as it were. So in the previous world, the Spider God was actually just like an embodiment or a belief, and in this world, it actually is a physical thing. It's a physical spider. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
It was pretty cool too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so, I like that. I was a little disappointed there wasn't any huge battle, but like you said, it makes it far more believable.
Here's also. Go ahead. I was just
and in the end, they're able to finally find some of the actual Fire Slayer bodies, as it were, with green beards, green hair, and then also they're able to find Oaken wrapped up within the spiderwebs.
Yep. So they find Oaken, they bring him back up. So this is where they find out that the Skaven have the spear, and they have to get out of there. They do have there's more confrontations, all that kind of stuff, but they have to make it back, and they realize that so they've got to track it down. And the Skaven have this huge machine, like Ferris wheel doom wheel kind of thing, and it's left just like marks through the forest. Like it's easy to track. They make some fun comments about how sneaky and sly they are, and at the same time, just obvious.
Yeah, telegraphing their every move that they made.
I love the fact that it's mentioned, even if there's like a mega wheel that they've got, they took it into the heart of this heartwood, and now it's infested with spiders all over the place.
So it's acting up. It's not. So they have to actually park it at this place in order to kind of de-infest it.
Craig? Yeah.
Yep, at Lion Craig. And it's at this point basically where all the other forces, so they get back onto the KO ship. They're able to kind of follow along.
Kel finally catches up.
Yep, Kel catches up. Uduk is able to, it kind of partners with him to go after it, etc. And so they work together with the 99 Feathers.
And then, of course, the whole Skaven army is actually there at Lion Craig as well.
Yep. And so there's a pretty cool battle. I don't want to go blow by blow, but they're kind of able to take him from a couple different sides. The Kel and Uduk are already attacking him. So there's like three different kind of attacking from three sides. The Skaven end up, like peeling out, that sort of stuff.
Like you want to see the movie or like the scene of this battle, right? Because a good choreographer would be able to like align this real, because you got the three sides, the good, the order fighting against both chaos, and they're summoning demons left and right and fighting the Skaven at the same time. But then chaos is also anti, fighting both sides as well. So you can see sort of a lot of whirling, fighting a variety of different enemies who are, you know, at your neck. So it really painted a great, for me anyway, a great scene of sort of a mass confusion, bunch of different vantage points, a battlefield scene that you don't get when you're dealing just with two different sides fighting each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I love that even Lion Craig, which is this little incidental, this is the place where the battle is, has this previous history. It's called Lion Craig because of this previous history, and now they're here, but like every place that we've been has this previous history, right? The Fire Slayer Lodge has been taken over by the Spider Fang. The Shugol, the worm, has been taken over. Everything has been taken over. And even like the incidental, like, this is a really cool place. This is amazing. Yeah, but it used to be something else, and this is what happened, and now we have this, right? Every place has a history to it, instead of just being, they fought the battle here because this is where the army showed up.
Don't they know the realms are infinite? Like, go find another rock, man. Like, jeez.
Kind of one of the culmination then of the story, and there's some cool stuff in here with Nyoka is able to kind of like channel Sigmar, and do Sagmar, and able to go in and do some damage to Uduk, but the feathers come in and spoil that a little bit. Rogard on Harrow had kind of had a moment in Gorch where we thought he was lost, but you know, he's kind of comes in to rescue her, and then there's a moment where Edhema comes and say, you know, I kind of admire Rogan, so I'm gonna go and help him out. So there's a couple of connection pieces there.
She owed him a favor, actually. Like, she saved her life earlier.
That's how she justifies it, you know.
It's true. You have a life to save, so like that doesn't seem fair.
Zana and Lugash and Volker jump into the wheel. The Kel had come up underneath the wheel, kind of gotten into the wheel another way, and so there's a big confrontation inside the wheel. Why would people want to go inside the wheel, guys? What's happening?
I love how big inside the wheel is. Like, it's the Death Star, right? Like these hallways running around.
Well,
it's the central core, and
I would put Ferris wheel over Death Star size.
Well, with typical Skaven ingenuity, they figured out, like, if this spear can get hurled and then it can pass through realms and walls and whatever to get wherever it needs to go. They're like, what if we built a war machine around it and basically like throw it and then hang on to it with our war machine?
I love that. I love
chains. Like, there's literally chains around it. Oh, can't go anywhere.
Classic Skaven.
So yeah, that's the big idea by Quell is what would it be, like a
interdimensional musket ball? It's like punching holes.
Gerbil wheel. So they're kind of in the middle, and finally, I keep calling him the Kel, but a Hazian. So he's throughout the story has kind of conquered everything that's thrown at him in different ways. Like, he's not just like, it's axe, hammer, kill, but his thought process, the way he goes through it, all that kind of stuff has been interesting all along the way. And now he's finally, for the first time, so it's interesting because they cross paths, like the main group and Asian have crossed paths. They've been in the same places, but this is the first time that they've met each other. There's this, basically Lugash goes in to kind of do some stuff and try and go one-to-one, and you're like, maybe a Doomseeker could take out a Deathbringer. But this guy is just...
I don't really know. I don't know the rules well enough.
I don't know that either. But in this story, they've certainly built Asian up to be, a best of the best kind of guy. And then Zana goes in to try and kind of do some stuff, and he just, he's, stabbing her and pushing her around and hitting her and stuff, and she's not ready to stand up to it. But they're all
be a writer, Eric. You should write novels.
Yeah. And then and of course Volker is trying to shoot him. And the first time he misses, and then is able to get. So there's a scene then where Hazian gets the spear, and he's like, now I've got it, it's mine. And he's like, what did you call him, the guy with the gun? And he whispers his name or yells his name to the spear and chucks it, just kind of basically lets it go, I think. And it's
now, did anyone totally follow this? Like, time slows
Nope.
down, and at first I thought it was like, oh man, like time slowing down, but I think it was like the spear gloating. I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was. He was a little full of himself being the spear in the situation.
Oh, man, I haven't killed anything in 1,000 years. Like this, I'm gonna savor this delicious moment.
Okay.
And so it slows it way down, which gives Volker the chance to dodge. So.
Well, and he makes a shot, but yeah, he's experiencing it, right? He's in it. It's not like it isn't like just slow time. Like he's experiencing, like, I can't do what I need to do.
Yeah. Well, but I think it's also Josh Reynolds has pointed out before that the realms have different times, right? Like, so being in the realm of beasts, they're talking about how the nights are longer, right? So if you have something that's passing through an interdimensional portal, which is really what that inside of that mega wheel is supposed to be, I think it's like the whole idea of being a paradox, right? So even though it's just from here to there, right, it's actually traveling through this interdimensional portal that's meant to propel this mega wheel throughout the whole thing. And so I think it's literally going through all the realms to try and kill him, as it were. And that's what gives him the time, is the shifting of going through all these different realms.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but at the end of the day, the hero just dodged the spear that was thrown at him, this super ultra mega spear that was thrown at him. And that's my one complaint of this whole book is, what? If that all I have to do is dodge the spear? Okay, why did no one try that?
It was going to kill him the first time, did it? Anywhere in this book did it say the spear was going to kill him the first time it saw him?
I guess that was assumed.
Well, and that's and I could, because it was slow. I mean, I couldn't tell. I've got to reread this part. But does he redirect it somehow? Does he grab hold of it?
No. Well,
how does he get it to go into the?
He dodges. The spear goes past him, and then like heat-seeking missile style, turns around, comes back for him, like screaming and like, I'm coming to get you. And then the center of this center of this machine has this weird rift, and this thing gets damaged. Volker jumps into it, and basically the spear overshoots him, just like what happened to Gal Miraz, right? Like it gets tricked into another realm early on, so you got a little bit of a parallel there. So spear ends up in some not just in another realm, but like in the void between realms. But that's still not stopping it, right? Because the wrap up, like what's cool is, again, we talked about how this is really just something pretending to be a spear. It's something far worse. As soon as it's thrown at him, like he feels something tear loose inside him, and now he's got so spear goes off somewhere, another realm, but it's still coming after him. Wherever it is, it turned around and it's coming back at him. And he knows, like he's having nightmares of this thing chasing him, like those.
So past this time period, into the future, he's
exactly
in the next days as he's recovering. To just kind of wrap up, he does put a bullet in Hazian's eyeball, smashing that to pieces. Doesn't stop him, no, but I think that allows them to escape and get out of there.
Can I just point out my favorite moment is when the Quell, is it? He pulls the ejection seat. And he goes flying up, and he's like, "Oh, okay, it's all good. We're good. We're all fine." And then like one raven lands on his shoulder, and more ravens show up, and then he doesn't say what happened, but like obviously, right? Quell ends up getting killed by the 99 feathers, but it was just a great, like, I don't know, joke play. It was
but go ahead.
No, I was just gonna. The recovery, and he's seeing nightmares, and so what is? So how do they take care of that?
Grungni, there's no escaping this spear, right? So Grungni but Grungni does come up with a solution, kind of clever god that he is. It's a disguising rune that basically makes his location uncertain. Like whatever realm he's in, the spear then thinks he's in a different realm. So it's always going to be
switches the SIM card.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but even Volker's like, this rune doesn't last forever, does it? And Grungni's like, no.
Nope.
To be fair, I'm going to give you a lot of dangerous jobs, so you might die before that.
Yeah.
We're gonna.
Okay.
Go
ahead, Aaron. You go.
Get into fan fiction here, but honestly, what they should do is like have Volker take one for the team, take the rune out, have him take it in the chest with the spear, have Sigmar reforge him, and what do you know? Now we have a sweet ass spear. Like,
yeah,
problem solved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, but the consequences and the result of that then is that the spear can't find him to kill him, but while he's in pursuit, he can't be owned by anybody. Nobody can claim him.
Right.
The spear, and so that spear is out of play for right now,
right.
Which isn't ideal. That's not what any one party was looking for, but all things considered,
next best thing. Yeah.
Next best thing. And I really liked that play because I think it certainly, if this continues, it's certainly going to come into play some point. There's got to be some caper or like plan that, just as you said, Aaron, that could happen.
Sure, wait until he's an old man and then be like, right, call it a day.
Why don't we talk about a few? Let's start with maybe predictions. Where do you think that this story could go? Paul, you said you had, from Josh Reynolds himself on Combat Phase podcast, shared a little bit of what the next story could be.
Yeah. Do we want to make predictions before I reveal that or after?
Oh, sure. Any of you guys want to take a stab?
Well, not so much a prediction, but we can just talk about like what we've got. So basically, everybody's still alive. Like all the major players are still major players, and if they had motivations before, you better believe they got motivations now, right? So I reckon I'll call them the party is still, I think, in Grungni's employ, and the next, whatever the next lamentation is, or all of them are still on the table. So by no means are they done searching or looking. We've given the Chaos players plenty of reason to have chips on their shoulders. So I reckon there's going to be some revenge play in there as well. And we've got Edema, who admittedly was part of the party for a while, still has the job of finding lamentations as well as we find through her communication with Neferata. She's still on the hunt. So
she's going to stick with them and see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, whether or not what sticking with them ends up looking like, who knows? But I think it's sort of a natural continuation of where we're at right now, which is not a drastic prediction by any means.
Yeah, I think we're going to see some moments where some of them, there's a moment where Edema says that she would really love to see a whole unit of Rogans, what they could do.
Sure.
And so I think we maybe not right away, but I can see this being something where we start again pulling different. We've got individuals from different places coming together. I think there's easily a place or a point where you could have larger factions coming together because of the relationships that are happening with these groups or with these people. So you could see, a unit of Demigryph knights from Garan and some Blood Knights from Shyish, fighting next to each other in some battle, blah, blah, blah. So I think there could be some really cool stuff like that happening.
Have the individuals end up being representative of larger wholes, which would be great.
Yeah. I mean, you think of like the, Lord of the Rings, it starts off with individuals, but they rally nations.
Exactly. Sure. Well, small time friendships ends up being the starting point for larger alliances.
Yeah.
Oh, right on. I get you.
And charm bracelets. I think they all get charm bracelets.
Sure.
Perfect.
Anybody else got any predictions or thoughts on where it might go? Any romances?
I'm wondering if the Soul Lash, which we saw in the Auction of Blood, I think that ended up in the hands of the Death, right?
Yeah. Neferata's agent got it.
Neferata got a hold of that in some way. So it's possible.
I mean, spoilers. Sorry, I don't know if we were supposed to say that, but
I mean, we're in spoiler
We
territory.
said spoilers like 700 times already.
well, I'm sure, but for this, I mean, that's okay, whatever. I got you.
Anyway, that's a possible way to go, particularly since that could tie in with the resurgence of Nagash, who's definitely scheming and plotting and getting ready to make his move here. I think we'll see something from the Realm of Death before we see something about Shadow and Light, maybe. But anyway, that could coincide with that push on the bigger AOS front, possibly.
Anybody else? Do you want to read that then, Paul?
Basically what the pitch for the next book is that it's instead of being a rollicking adventure film,
and
it's going to be a heist film.
Oh.
Yeah, this is Combat Phase, sorry. Kenny Lowe had Josh Reynolds on, and he was saying the pitch for the next book is that instead of being a rollicking adventure film, it's going to be a heist film.
Nice.
So,
I'd read that book.
That would be amazing, right? Like, so everybody go out and buy this book so we can get that book as well. Because number one, everybody loved this book. So number two, we need an AOS heist film. Like, I mean,
I got it for you too. There's one of the 8 Lamentations is in the worm, and it's moving at like 9 miles an hour.
I can't go faster.
If no one has to navigate like a laser like security system, then I feel like that's a pretty big missed opportunity.
Yeah, but only if Catherine Zeta-Jones is in it. Otherwise, and not that bothered.
Play Dima or Zana or whoever. Cool, I'm into that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna see one suggestion. You want to go around the horn here, and people throw out a favorite moment and why from the whole book, like an iconic moment or theme or something that you really took away from this book. We'll go, Eric, lay it on us.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal the sky battle. Was one of my favorites. Just that when I saw the KO book, that Megalofin was probably the most striking kind of idea thing. And as I'm for my next army planning out the display board with the giant fish battle, like that's definitely probably a highlight of the book. It was such a joy and to play in and to think around, and it definitely rewarded the read.
I like there was definitely like a Moby Dick feel to it, right? Like the overlords, Captain Bront, knew this creature obviously was behaving in a different way, but it was a known and super dangerous threat. You just got a feel for like how those work, because there's that big swarm of gun haulers comes out of the clouds, and that was super fun.
He was all like, I knew it'd be back. I knew it'd be back.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Aaron, what do you got?
I mean, we talked about it, but I did sort of like just sort of I keep saying sort of the discovery and the moving through the what's the forest name, the Heartwood, but it's Gorsh. Yeah, so when I say the mine, I referenced before the Mines of Moria field, like that's exactly how I felt, and I was on edge. Like I was like, oh, I mean, obviously you knew it was going to be spiders and goblin riders because there's only so many things that it could have been, but even so, the unknown and sort of discovering this abandoned, lodge or whatever you want to call it, I really enjoyed, and I was only joking about being bummed out about having sort of the Wood Elves job supplanted a little bit, but that is those sort of environments and those sort of settings are what originally drew me to the Wanderers, and so that regardless of who created it, dwarfs or otherwise, I still liked that setting, that environment, and sort of the running up and down the wood roads and what have you. So I was really into that. That's my favorite.
I think it'd be hella cool to see somebody do the Root Kings or the Fire Slayer Lodge from a
sure.
explore that area. That'd be super rad.
I agree. Well, and I like the idea of so you're having the Fire Slayers with like the green hair and so on and so forth. Maybe not that specifically, but the idea that like they're I don't know, lending credibility, I guess you would put it, that any different color scheme that you could give to your dwarves or any other army, there's a way to sort of justify it and create a whole mythos around why they would be that way, in sort of an official way.
Paul.
I actually really liked the Liberius Wormicus, I think it was.
Vermis.
Yeah.
Liberia Vermis. As seen
Where
before in Clan Pestilence.
yeah, they the 99 feathers showed up. Like I just thought that was such a cool entrance and such a cool idea for a force, especially when they started transforming and like the description, etc. It seemed really cool, and the fact that like as I kind of said, they were a bit nameless, and then they took some casualties, but they weren't obliterated, right? Like they were the only force in this book that actually had people die, but the character itself was not impacted, as it were, right?
Yeah.
So,
which I will say I didn't mention before. It was one thing that bothered me is I kind of suspected at the outset. I was like, I think every one of these characters just about is gonna live through. Like I think it's one of those things where like, I felt like maybe there wasn't a great risk to some of the characters for quite just because I felt certain that Volker was gonna live through, the whole thing. Even even Azian, I was like, I feel like this guy's gonna,
I thought
survive
Rogan
through
was
it.
going to die.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't. I don't know. But then none of them did. And again, that was some of my complaint with Plague Garden was that the heroes didn't seem to pay any of a price. I'm sure the people who lost hands and eyes and stuff would disagree about not having paid a price and stuff, but it was the same thing where it's like the heroes kind of got through without paying any like real big cost.
Yeah, and we can't really feel the cost unless we care about somebody, right?
Sure.
Otherwise, it's just,
Right. Absolutely, that's a great point. And so I think he did a good job making us care a lot about the characters, and I don't want to be cheap. Like you don't just gotta kill people for giggles or whatever. But
Who giggles when they kill someone?
I need to believe that that there's a risk or a threat, and after a couple of books where that hasn't happened, it starts to dilute some of the tension of whether something's at risk.
I agree with you, but then also this is a trilogy too, and maybe it takes the final, or it's supposed to be a trilogy, right? So like maybe it takes the final book before we're actually going to see a real loss. But
that's fair.
Who knows?
Or I mean, it's always Empire Strikes Back style, right? Like second one
Sure.
bad stuff can happen. So
Yeah.
I did feel like Nyoka actually did take some serious damage, though.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not saying they
that
didn't
last
take.
battle. Yeah.
I'm saying like she lost an eye, right? There's people took damage. I thought.
Well, and
people.
Yeah, so that's interesting too. An idea though is because then Yardak took her eye and is now able to spy on them. So there is certainly a cost.
Oh yeah,
that may be
different
than death. I thought she was going to die too. I thought there was a moment where she could have, because she was just getting beaten pretty bad with her red mask. So there's definitely a couple of opportunities that would have, like Rogan would have felt all right because he was kind of a red shirt for a lot of it. So there's an opportunity. It would have. I think he's going to be a cool character. I think we're going to like him. He may have a chance to shine in the future.
Yeah, I want to know more about him.
You want to know more about Harrow? Let's be real.
Well, that's true. Harrow is my hero.
I need a hero.
Are you holding out for Harrow?
Let me lay a favorite on you guys here. So I was a huge fan of Grungni being in there. As a god, he was the most interesting so far from the Sigmar's pantheon.
Agreed.
The other gods, and it's by the nature of where we've seen them, which was in the Realm Gate Wars. They're mostly like, I'm super angry, I'm gonna kick some fools. They didn't feel very nuanced. He did. To be fair, like some of his characteristics felt a little bit lifted out of. I mean, not lifted, influenced, I guess, by like Greek mythology. He's a crippled forge god.
How is he crippled? Did I miss that? Like, what's crippled about him?
I broke his legs. Somebody broke his legs, and I cannot remember who. We'll have to go. We'll
that would cripple
check on
you,
that.
basically.
But yeah, he was paternal. Like the relationship he had all of these old surly dwarves walking around who were willing to kind of talk back to him a little bit, you know, in his forge. And he could have been just this really stereotypical Dwarden, you know, god, like, but he was much more interesting than that, and he got by being clever, right? Like it wasn't just I'm gonna punch something in the face. He was out thinking. I don't know. He was great. And he's the first one that really felt like part of a full-fledged pantheon. I guess you know like the ones that you would think of, like the best mythology that you read. He fit that very well. So I really liked him as a character, and also there's a huge piece of the Age of Sigmar universe getting dropped in and filled out, sketched in there. So
the two funniest moments was one where Grugny and the White Dwarf are talking, and there was the White Dwarf say something like, you know, which one of us is older, or something to that effect. He's like, what does he say? Like, don't stop saying things that confuse me, or like, you know, like to the like putting a point on the fact that like it's possible, right? That the White Dwarf is from the old world, right? And he makes a point of it. So that was pretty funny. And the other one was where Hazian says to Yardak, "Is there really 99 of them?" And he goes, "I don't know. I've not counted." Like, well, what if there's more? You don't want to have to pay for those extra swords. You know, so like don't account too hard on it. But there's a couple of I thought there was some good humor in there, and that, you know, again made some of these characters more dimensional. So
yeah, I like that there was a little mechanical spider that was crawling around in Grundy's forge, and then when Yardak took one of the forest grots, and he transformed him into a luminescent spider that led them out of Gorch. Like, so basically like a spider GPS. I was like, that was just kind of cool. So
as well.
I just wanted to agree with Davey that I think Grugny is, I think at this point, the most interesting guy that we've read. No slight to Sigmar or Galariel. But what stood out to me was the whole when confronted with Khorne, how he was willing to not fight and sort of back down. That was really what made him stand out to me. Sigmar would have fought, Gash would have fought, not me. Yeah.
Well, and we find out at the very end when he goes and visits
Volander,
that Volander was one of his apprentices at a time, and because he's not Sigmar, he let that go, and there may be some repercussions of him not being willing to fight. And, you know, he really kind of threw down the gauntlet at that point in this meeting to saying, you know what, I'm not going to let you guys have him. Like, and so he definitely gets his ires up, and but he's very complex. Yeah, he's very playful, and he's very like a human and down to earth. Like, and you see that in his ability.
He's short like a dwarf.
Because he's short.
Well, he can be any size he wants, right? There's times where it comes down to size.
Has a couple moments of you know, being a wrathful god. Like you know, he gets to display quite a bit of depth, which we haven't gotten from the other gods so far. So yeah, huge thumbs up. Josh Reynolds, big strength that he's had is writing villains that have interesting motivations and backgrounds, and then, you know, finding a way to write some of these difficult to write characters, be they, you know, worshippers of Khorne or a dwarven forge god, and finding a way to write them that's interesting and not one dimensional. Finding some depth in some really difficult to write characters, I would say.
There was a couple of interesting things that also struck me in his writing and what he posed here. There's a theme that really called out to me. And if you guys have any that you want to talk about, but this idea of balance, there's a couple of points where this theme comes up. One where Neferata she has like ice and blood as a drink she puts together. And, you know, this idea, she was like just the right amount, right, of this or that to make it good. And that she talks a little bit about just kind of this balance of action. There's a metaphor in the weights of the forest lodge, where they have their gold on a scale, and when it gets too light, they go to war. Right? They need to go and get more. And when it's too heavy, they send out the sons to form new lodges.
Yeah.
And then there's also a point where Volker, I think, to me too, like showed his wisdom for being such a young person, because he's talking with somebody and it kind of just sparks in his head. He's like, because the question is, well, why did these gods leave, and why are they not more active? Why are they sending people to go and do fix their mistakes?
Yep.
And he realizes, he's like, well, there's a balance. There's equal and opposite. When there's a action, there's a reaction. And so if Grugni were to come out and trudge through the lands, going and grabbing the spear, Khorne would need to be coming out, or somebody else would need to be coming out in the like. And that battle, that kind of approach to this, would destroy many more lives. And you see that at the end as well, when Grugni goes down into the Khorne forge. Khorne is instantly alerted, and he gets up to have a fight. And that sort of thing. So there's this idea of balance and the role that these people played, and I think that was the very first time I've had that anybody's explained it like that or come at it like that. In that, and it's true for every single mythical story that we've ever read from any other author, of why aren't the gods just doing it themselves? And so that really, taking that out of this book really excites me for putting all of these pieces in place and saying, no, yeah, Grugni needs to be playing the role he's playing. So I thought this idea of balance was a really cool theme to come out of this, and I like it a lot.
Sure. That final scene, I think it was final or towards the end, whatever, that what you're talking about, when Grugni goes down and confronts Volunder, and then the Khorne, like, so much came out of that, like, just couple page scene in terms of like depth and like realization and like thematic. I mean, almost as much as this is an exaggeration, but almost as much as the rest of the book combined, really. But like that, maybe just because I most recently read it as well, but that scene is what stuck out to me the most.
Well, I think it's because he flips that switch. He's playing such a kind and like jovial and give and take kind of god.
Sure.
And then in that last scene, he's all steel. Like he shows his, and it's just a dichotomy, and you're like, oh wow, you've thought he had depth there, all of a sudden you see another side of him. So
sure. I mean, the definition of like a big picture reach, or the ramifications are very far reaching from that particular scene.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Well, gentlemen, are there any other things that we want to? Do you have any critiques of the book? Are there any things that you would want to see? Not that Josh is going to watch this, but anything that you would say about the book that you'd like to see, or that you felt could have been. I know, Davey, you critiqued death. No characters dying, no repercussions.
Less about death, more about stakes, or risk. Feeling that there's a true risk or threat to the characters. So, be it corruption or death, or something like that.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able. Oh, go ahead if you want to do yours.
Oh, I just had. There was a few times where in the writing, at least 4 times or 5 times, where in the writing I felt like Josh wrote something and then contradicted it a little bit.
Kinda, yeah. Go ahead.
I don't remember the earlier ones that seemed maybe a little bit bigger, but there was a point where Volker had a conversation with Grugni about why this was happening, and then later I think Volker had an inner dialogue about well, why is he doing this? And I felt like that had been answered earlier. There was a few things where, and this might have been part of it, and I don't know. There's a part where it says the tree. So Yuduk and Hazian are talking, and Yuduk says, "I have a bargain," and he says, "I make no offers." And then Hazian says, "Well, what prompts this offer?" And so again, it seemed more of like a word usage that were contradicting each other. Hazian says, "A brave man doesn't need wisdom," and Yuduk says, "Well, you're very wise." And so that could have been him, poking at him, but I didn't catch that. There was one where the warp wheel was trapped, and again, this could have been Quell being an idiot, but he's like, well, the warp wheel's trapped, I can't possibly move it. Well, but the spear, If the spear could go someplace, well, but I need to get the wheel moving in order to do it. And so like there's just this thing of like, it seemed like it set it up like the wheel was unable to move, but then the answer for it was to move the wheel.
Just move the wheel and then you're fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So so there was a couple of those things that that seemed contradictory more in grammar than in story, or in like just maybe in the editing process got mixed up.
I gotcha. Mine is actually building off that a little bit. They've sort of focused on, or my gripes focus on Hazian, because I really liked him and I wanted to like him, but I sometimes had a hard time understanding what his motivations were. And even towards the end is when I started like really noticing. So you're talking about like contradictions and things like that. So he's like, all right, well, I'm no longer gonna work for anybody. I'm my own man. Hey, Corn, I'm gonna give me stuff because I want to work for you. Like when just in a breath a second ago, you just said you're gonna do it yourself, and that you're gonna sort of then immediately appeal to him, and then not a couple sentences later, he's gonna link back up with Udak, if I get that impression, like somehow, or like he recognizes that that the Ravens there.
The Ravens are still
yeah. So whether it's intentional, I don't know. But like, so again, maybe I'm just misreading it. But it seemed like he had this realization and immediately abandoned the realization that he's his own person. So there's that, and I guess just even throughout the book, why he joined up with Udak in the first place, and I just didn't know where he was coming from. Sometimes I thought he was just sort of a murderous, berserker sort of dude, but then he gave some thoughts to things that I think he didn't think that character would think about. I'm putting this into words well, but
there's a point where they're negotiating about the coming together, and I was like that. Sazian was like, you know what? I realize that you actually need me.
Sure, yeah, true.
But he doesn't actually leverage that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, okay, well, so we're gonna get together then. All right. Yeah. So I can see that one. I can see that one.
Still liked him though. He's still my dude.
I did. I agree. Any gripes or critiques from you guys? From Paul?
Well, for me, it was we have this whole setup for Gorch, right? So we're going into this Fire Slayer Lodge. We're going into this Spider Fang battle. We're going into this Skaven battle, and then there was no real battle, right? At the end, it was just everything had already happened. We're going to fight this last Ragnarok, and that's going to be it. Right? Like, I was really anticipating this, like, awesome, sweet battle, especially when, Aaron, you were talking about this tension of, like, on the Mines of Moria and everything's going to be happening. And then, in the end, it is basically just like, okay, we're just going to, we're going to have this kind of skirmishes, and then everything has already happened, and now we're going to figure out where we're going from here. So
you want to see a battle?
I wanted a little bit more like resolution, or a little bit more. I don't know.
You wanted
a little
to see
bit more something.
The Spider Fang win is what you wanted.
Yeah, you wanted to see.
They kind of always lose, but I think I just wanted to be like, even if it was just they're at the top of the thing and the Ragnarok's coming onto them, but then they see the Skaven and the Spider Fang fighting underneath with as the last Fire Slayer fell or something like that, right? Like, we had all these forces there. We had all these battles going on, and we saw almost none of it.
So if it had been happening in parallel,
yeah,
gotcha.
Maybe something like that. So,
all right. Well,
all right, Paul. I guess.
Well, so I mean, we've covered a lot of the story. We've covered a lot of themes, predictions, the setting, our critiques. Any last words? Anything else you guys want to shout out before we close up the show?
Nope, very enjoyable. Even if you have not read it, if this was your first encounter with the book, is listening through to this whole podcast, I think it's still worth. There's so many cool scenes, interactions, and all that sort of thing. You should go check it out for sure. And let's hope for a follow-up.
Yeah.
My final thought is, are we just led to believe that Oaken was the only surviving dwarf? And if he wasn't, did they just leave the other dwarfs down there? That's messed up.
The fate of the gods. Chosen.
I like the book. I recommend it. You should read it.
Agreed. There's so many just scenes and things that get played out that you want. Every time you read the campaign books and you want to dig deeper, this one digs deeper. So go read it. And we've given you the plot line, but it's worth going back and reading some of these things. I'm going to go back and read some of these again, and get these senses back into it. So definitely recommended. All right, gentlemen, it's time for our reforging. Like and subscribe the channel, and leave a comment below. Leave a review for us on iTunes, and I'll have each of you list off the best place to reach you on Twitter.
You can get me at @red_Zeke.
You can find me at @abohler, which is ABOHLER. Yeah.
You can find me at PJ Shard.
And I am at Stone Monk Gamer. All right. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Good night.